And this is lesson 77. We are talking about inequalities with negative coefficients. And we want to solve inequalities with negative coefficients in this, okay? Well, first example just says to multiply both sides of this inequality by -1 and explain how to preserve the truth of the inequality. So, what they want us to do is take 6 times -1, okay, and get -6. And then 5 times -1 and get -5. Now, we want this inequality to be true. So, for example, this first one says 6 is greater than 5. That is true, okay? But if I simply put a greater than sign here, okay, is -6 bigger than -5? So again, I multiplied both sides by -1, and now all of a sudden -6 is not bigger than -5. So what I have to do to make this inequality true is take this sign and flip it around. So I multiplied both sides of the inequality by -1, and when I did that I had to flip the sign around to make it true, because -6 is less than -5. So I had to flip the sign when I multiplied by -1 to make this inequality true still. And this will hold true for all inequalities with negative coefficients. And what that means is, like, if there's a negative number in our inequality, okay, we'll talk about what that means on the next slide. So let's go ahead and look at an example here. Okay, example 2 says to solve and graph the inequality, okay? And we've got our steps written over here. Make sure you get those written down. Okay, now what I mean by a negative coefficient is this number that's attached to the x. Notice how it's not just 3x's, it's -3x's. Okay, when that happens, that's called a negative coefficient. And we have to follow some different rules for our inequalities. So here's how this is going to look with a negative coefficient. First thing we do never changes. We need to change our subtraction to addition. So we're going to take this and make this -3x plus -10 is greater than 8. Okay, and now we're going to solve for the variable. We're going to solve for my x's here. Well, the very first thing I have to do is get my x's by themselves, and I'm going to do that again by canceling out the -10. I cancel out -10 with a +10 on both sides. And when that cancels, I've got -3x's are greater than, and 8 plus 10 is 18. Notice here I'm solving my inequality for the variable, just like an equation. Now to get x by itself, I have to divide, okay? Because this says -3 times x. Well, the opposite of multiplying by -3 is dividing by -3. Okay? This cancels, and I get x, and 18 divided by -3 is -6. Now here's where step 2 comes in. It says when you multiply or divide by a negative on both sides, you have to flip the inequality sign. Okay, so look at here. When I showed my work, I divided both sides by -3. There's a -3 over here and a -3 over here. That means this sign has to flip around. And we get x is less than -6. Okay, so when this number that's attached to the x is a negative, we're going to have to end up flipping this sign around at the end. Okay, so numbers that will make this true are numbers that are less than -6. Okay, now we can test that theory by checking this. Okay, let's look right here. If I pick a number that's less than -6, let's say like -10, and I plug it in, okay, for x, -3 times -10, we want to know, is that greater than 18? Okay, so we picked a number less than -6, -10 is less than -6, and now we're going to solve this. -3 times -10 is 30, which is bigger than 18. Okay, so this works for this part right here. And this happened because we had to flip the sign when we divided by the negative. Alright, let's go on to the next example. This one says to solve and graph. So again, first thing we're going to do is change any subtraction to addition. So I've got -5 times x plus -3 is greater than 5 times x plus -3. Now, first thing after that is parentheses. We've got parentheses that we can't combine like terms in, so what do? We distribute. So I'm going to have -5 times x plus -5 times -3 is 15. And on the other side, I have to distribute over here too. So we got 5 times x plus 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. Alright. Well, to solve an inequality like this, I have to get my x's on the same side of this sign right here. So basically what that means is I can't have x's over here. So I need to cancel out x's on either this side or that side. And since we like our x's on the left, I'm going to cancel out the x's on the right. So I get rid of 5x's with negative 5x's. So what happens is these x's, 5x's and negative 5x's, cancel. Okay, so I go over here. Negative 5x plus negative 5x is negative 10x's. Plus, I still got 15 is greater than, and on this side now, all I have is negative 15. Now I need to get the x term all by itself, so I'm going to do a negative 15 on both sides. And I got negative 10x is greater than, negative 15 plus negative 15 is negative 30. And then I'm going to divide by negative 10 on both sides. And again, I'm dividing by a negative on both sides. That means I flip the sign. And negative 30 divided by negative 10 is 3. So here's my solution to the equation, or to the inequality, sorry. And now I need to graph that. So again, now I'm going to make a number line with my positive 3 in the middle and a couple of numbers on either side of it. I need an open dot at 3 and shaded toward numbers that are less than 3 for this one. Okay? And there's our solution and our graph. We got 2 parts to our answer here. And remember, we divided by a negative on both sides of the equal sign. Means we had to flip this sign around. Let's do one last example here. Example 4 says, Marcy sees a shirt that she likes that costs $50, and she will not buy it unless it is $30 or less. So we want to find the percent of decrease and the price as required. She's going to solve this inequality. Okay? And this says, solve the inequality to find the minimum discount she requires. So basically what she's doing is she's taking the $50 the shirt costs, and she's saying, I need to figure out how much money to take off here. So she's going to take the price times the percent discount, and that's got to equal less than or equal to $30 because she can buy it for $30 or less than that. Okay, so we need to solve this inequality. So I'm going to rewrite it. And now I'm going to change the subtraction to addition. I need to get my x's on the side all by themselves, so I have to cancel out this 50, and it's a positive 50, so I'm going to subtract the 50 from both sides and get negative 50x is less than or equal to 30 plus negative 50 is negative 20. And now I'm going to divide by negative 50 on both sides. I'm going to get x, and then again we're dividing by a negative on both sides, so I flip this sign around, is greater than or equal to negative 20 divided by negative 50. We can knock off the zeros, and a negative divided by negative is a positive, so it's 2/5. Okay? Now this says find the minimum discount she requires. Okay? So we can say the price has to be 2/5, or we need to figure out a percent decrease, okay? So 2 out of 5 is equal to what percent? Okay, percent out of 100. Well, I can multiply by 20, and that's x is greater than or equal to 40%. Okay, so her discount needs to be 40% or more for her to be able to buy the shirt. So she's got to look for a pretty good deal. Alright, and that's your lesson on inequalities with negative coefficients. Good luck on the homework.